This is Protiviti Legal Perspectives.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Protiviti and Hedley May. My name is Vanessa Di Samame, founding partner of executive search firm Hedley May, the lucky co-host and moderator for tonight's program. Really thrilled to present this engaging and insightful discussion with two esteemed women executives who have really dedicated their career to legal compliance and risk in financial services. So with that in mind, I'd love to introduce our first guest speaker, Kate Ring. Kate is the Chief Compliance Officer for Stash Financial, a very well-known fintech with more than 2 million customers and about $100 million in revenue. As CCO, Kate leads all compliance and risk management efforts across the company, and that includes leadership for the compliance program for the broker-dealer, the investment advisor, the bank offering, and AML programs. Kate's career includes various compliance and legal roles, including almost 10 years at LPL, where she met Michelle, our other guest speaker. So Michelle, you currently serve as a member of the board of directors and chair of audit and risk committee for Focus Financial, a strategic investor in Registered Investment Advisors. You are also a member of the board of advisors for fintech Domify AI. However, I think you are much better known as a former CLO of LPL Financial, leading a 1,000+ organization across legal compliance and risk for the nation's leading independent broker-dealer. But that's not all. You've held very senior roles in legal risk and compliance at Morgan Stanley and Fisher Investments after completing your legal training at a law firm. So thank you both for joining us. So Michelle, maybe we'll start with you. You've been on both sides of the aisle, legal and compliance. So really curious to hear your thoughts on what it's been like to move successfully from one function to the next.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Vanessa and Hedley May and Protiviti for inviting me. It's great to be talking to everybody. And just to talk about that, I think it's really important to understand how legal professionals especially can get themselves ready to be compliance professionals. So I think like the primary skill of a lawyer is critical thinking, right? You see, you analyze, you address an issue, and it's a useful tool no matter what you do. So that's also one of the most important skills that a compliance officer can have, right? Seeing issues, understanding rules, but also then designing systems to prevent them, to detect them, to remediate them. And so one thing I feel that helped me really a lot when I moved into compliance, I started my in-house career as a litigator at Morgan Stanley. So I dealt with advisors a lot. I dealt with investors a lot. But then at the end of my tenure as a litigator there, I had this big regulatory matter where the SEC had accused the firm of failing to have a system of compliance that was adequate. So in order to defend the firm, which we successfully did, we won that case. So that was a big victory. But to do that, I had to get really familiar with everything that compliance did. So read all the manuals, interview all the senior people, understand how it works. And the way that you think it works from the outside is not actually how it works, right? The way that you think it works when you're a litigator is that the compliance people should be finding everything, stopping everything. And the only reason that we ever have problems and get sued is because why hasn't compliance got one more rule, one more set of surveillance tools? Actually learning how compliance actually worked in order to defend compliance turned out to be very eye-opening. And so then I think that when I moved into compliance, I was able to be successful because I wasn't as impractical as I would have been had I just gone straight from being a litigator. I think that lawyers can have this sort of idealistic vision of what compliance can do that doesn't always comport with the resources available. So anyway, when I was in compliance, I was then able to use my legal skills. I could analyze rules. I could assess whether certain actions would be problematic. And then I could leaven them with that pragmatism that I developed with this case. And then that actually was very helpful when I moved back into legal roles. I was then a much more pragmatic lawyer, having been in compliance, than I would have been had I just never done anything but practice law. So I think, and Kate can tell me if I did, help the team avoid that trap of perfectionism and then provide practical business advice. So I think that those two skills are very complementary of each other.
So Kate, tell us a little bit more about you and sort of how you got to where you are today. You've obviously made a transition from the more traditional side of financial services to a very dynamic fintech environment.
I kind of have a, similar, and that I've been between legal and compliance, but a little bit opposite. I'm a lawyer by training, obviously, but started in compliance and worked in some smaller, more entrepreneurial, an insurance-based broker-dealer, and then I worked in a proprietary options firm. And that kind of got me really focused on sort of the technology side. And this was years ago, not to date myself, but early on in sort of the algorithmic trading world. And so that was really exciting to me. But that was compliance. And then when I joined LPL, it was in a compliance function. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to work on the legal team for a number of years. And to Michelle's point, it was exactly, I like to think that I was able to become a better, more business-friendly lawyer because I had the experience of understanding, well, we can write the policy this way, but this is how advisors will actually act. So let's actually build that into our contract as we're negotiating these contracts. Very helpful. And I think, in addition to Michelle's points around the practicality, I think there's also the ability to understand and work with the business is super helpful. And think some lawyers and compliance folks think that they're not there to be a business partner. And I think that the experience that I've had, and I know Michelle has had, like, when you work with the business, I like to say, I live it today, like, bring me in early, bring me in often, and I will help you. Because if I'm the last person to understand what you want to do, it's probably going to have to be no. But if you brought me or my team in and we talked about it from the beginning, you may not get exactly to where you want to go to, but there aren't so many things that are bright line illegal or, against regulations that we can't get there. So my experience then led me to the great opportunity to be able to work and kind of shift into a much smaller company with a much smaller team and resources. And today I sort of get to live that every day of, I get calls all the time from our founders and others saying, here's an idea that we have. And because I have that sort of view of trying to help the business achieve their goals in a compliant and a risk, with the risk lens on it. It's certainly, all of my experience has led me to be able to, I think, be a valued partner, hopefully, and to be able to help the business achieve some of the goals.
And would you say that your day-to-day responsibilities being the CCO at a fintech are very different from what you would expect them to be at a more traditional outfit? Or how does your day-to-day look like?
It's an interesting question because when I think about it, at the end of the day, I'm still a chief compliance officer, right? We still are a regulated broker-dealer, investment advisor, have banks, all of our programs. And so, when I think back to when I took the leap and moved into this, it was like that sort of, is this risky? Do I know what I'm doing? And it's sort of going back and leaning on the experience of years and years of working with the Advisors Act, working with FINRA, working with all of this. So yeah, there is obviously all of the sort of what I like to call the keeping the lights on work that has to be done that my team does on a daily basis, monitoring, testing, all of those, key compliance components that, I'm sure all of our audience members do on a daily basis or supervise. But then also there's the additional level of that strategic involvement and being able to think through, we are a very mission-driven company. Our goal is to teach everyday Americans how to invest, even if it's $5 at a time. And so it's easy to be aligned to that mission for me personally. So I get to go to work every day and be able to think about our clients first, which not only makes me feel good as a person, but also as a compliance officer, and that our conflicts, our conflicts are limited and that we're so aligned with our clients. I wish I could say that, I could tell you what'll happen tomorrow or next week, but as many of you, I'm sure on the call experience, no 2 days are the same, but the bread and butter of the compliance functions are very, very similar.
Maybe that's the beauty of it, right? 2 days are the same, I suppose, as CCO or CLO probably. So Michelle, when you think about your roles, and you have been a CLO, you've been a CCO, you've been a CRO as well, so you really held a lot of responsibilities in your career. But thinking about legal and compliance specifically, where do the responsibilities or roles specifically overlap? And how do they collaborate, or what's the best practice model for collaboration?
So first of all, I think that one of the most important relationships that there is in the firm is between the CCO and the CLO, and probably the CRO in there as well. And it's because if it doesn't work, then it's just a disaster for everybody. So you want to be sort of arm in arm. And sometimes the CCO is reporting to the CLO. Sometimes they're reporting directly to the head of the business. Sometimes they're reporting to the head of risk. So there can be different business structures, but those two partners have to work arm in arm. So the compliance department is going to have a regulatory group that's going to be interpreting regulation and designing systems to be in compliance. So is the legal department is going to have a regulatory group that's going to be reviewing rules and giving advice to the business. So those two groups have got to work together. They cannot have, say, different interpretations of what the same rule requires. So you can end up, if you don't have a good relationship, you can end up with finger pointing and blame shifting and all kinds of problems. If you do have a good relationship, then you're streamlined, you're making wise use of your resources, and the legal department is there to advise the compliance department on whether or not the systems they're coming up with are working. I've seen bad relationships. I've seen good relationships. I do think that the two have to be collaborating, and the best way to do that is for people to understand what their responsibilities are, right? So it's not the responsibility necessarily of the chief legal officer to design the system of compliance. It's not the responsibility of the chief compliance officer to give legal advice to the business, even though he or she may be a lawyer and may be sorely tempted to give legal advice. I used to say a lot when I was not in a legal role, I am a lawyer, but I'm not going to be giving you legal advice. So let's get the law department in to do that. So trying to avoid stepping on each other's toes, I think, is really important.
When you think about your interaction, Kate, with legal, has it always been clear? How would you comment on that from your perspective?
I think I would start by saying, Michelle, I may have adopted that from you and your time, because I like to start often with, although I'm a lawyer, I'm not giving legal advice, because you don't ever want to overstep. And to your point, especially those of us who've been in compliance a long time with legal training, we can answer the question, but it's not appropriate in some cases. And frankly, I'm not in that role. But to answer your question, Vanessa, I work hand in hand with our legal team. In fact, in my current role, I report to the general counsel. So I would say, it is a daily collaboration. And I would point out that having a good relationship and collaborating doesn't necessarily mean that you're always agree and that you're always in the same mindset. I think the healthy debate back and forth, not on legal interpretation, but in terms of, implementation of those things is very, very helpful. I tend to try to do as much as we can. We have a small legal team. We leverage outside counsel as well. I always like to do as much as we can within the compliance function, because that is, the larger function and the bigger function, but then always have a gut check. And I use our legal team as that gut check to say, are you reading this the same way? Is this the right strategy? And that just is an ongoing dialogue on a regular basis. And we have distinct sort of delineation. I don't touch contracts, although I could have done that in my career. I handle disclosure documents. And so we keep those lines as clear as possible. But then always, if there's ever a question or a concern that you're overstepping, it kind of goes back to what Michelle was talking about, having those relationships to say, like, I'm sorry if this feels like it's overstepping, or don't let me overstep, and just acknowledging that, because it continues to build the trust. And it certainly helps when normally, if we're all together and working together, some of the stuff can be really tough sometimes. And some of the things that we're going through can, be tough questions. And so when you have that just personal relationship and trust, it's very, very helpful to get through the more difficult issues.
So you both touch on making sure the roles and responsibilities are clear. Obviously, establishing trust between the two functions is key. any other challenges that you've experienced in sort of forging that collaboration? And if yes, how do you work around it?
I mean, I would say for me personally, one challenge that I've seen, it's sort of the opposite of collaboration. And that is where, either a legal team member has in the past said, well, that's not my issue, that's a compliance issue. Or a compliance team, I've lived those experiences where it's like, I can't opine on that, that's a legal issue. And although those statements may be correct, to me, it's always a barrier to any progress. Like the correct way to answer that is, well, I'll have to consult, or we'll have to get back, and not just sort of throw the ball over the fence, which I think can happen in some instances. So that's a challenge, a barrier that, you just overcome it by kind of elbowing your way in and saying, okay, I get that this isn't my issue, but whose issue is it and who's going to solve it? Because it needs to be resolved.
Yeah, relationship building is key too. What about you, Michelle? I'm sure you've seen a lot of things in your career. So anything you can share with us?
Well, one thing I think it's important to remember is that you're not the focal point, right? You're not the business. You're not what's bringing in the revenue. And a lot of times, my experience was the business thinks that everything is compliance, legal, risk, supervision. It's all compliance. That those people are the compliance people. And so if you're kind of duking it out in front of the business with compliance and legal, that's not a good look for anybody, right? No, and then it confuses the business. So, I think you do things like, for instance, when I was in the compliance department, we felt that we were the primary owners of relationships with regulators, day-to-day relationships, right? Not with the enforcement or whatever, but just with the member supervision. And so we would set up regular meetings. And then we'd invite the legal people to join us so that they could hear what we were doing. So it was a collaborative effort. They didn't feel like they were being sort of sidelined. But it was clear that we were running these relationships. And so I just think that another good thing to do, if you're on the legal side, you want to back up the compliance department, right? If something goes wrong, the first question people ask, it's like when something goes wrong in finance, where were the auditors? I don't know, they were doing tests of transactions. They looked at 10 things, not 2,000 things. And that's why they didn't catch this. And then I think you have to respect, when you're in the legal department, you have to respect the chief compliance officer and their judgment, right? They know how to build these systems. They know what the resources they have are. They know how to allocate those resources. So you want to be supporting them and respecting them. And then I think another great thing, and I think both Kate and I are examples of this, you build collaboration by moving people back and forth and sharing resources. So somebody's been in compliance, they've been in legal, they're moving back and forth. They're building a bridge between the two departments, and it makes it easier. They can explain to their colleagues who maybe haven't been on that other side of the aisle how it works. And so I think that when I first started, I think some people thought it was a step down to go into the compliance department if you were in the legal department. And actually, it was a way to build your career and get management experience and have bigger teams and, learn all kinds of good things. I don't think people think that anymore. They don't view compliance as second-class citizens. But having people who've been on both sides is extremely helpful for both of the departments.
Have you found that there are maybe technology tools out there that have really helped you as you established collaboration, maybe with legal or other functions across the firm?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any magic bullet as it relates to the technology, but I think it's what we have, and you use it and use it well, right? So I think that for me, we are essentially a 100% remote company. And so for us, the tools that I work with my team, my compliance and risk team, as well as my legal team with, are those that allow us to do things async. We're able to work in documents together live and be able to do it. And we're able to, as much as, sometimes we'd love to be able to turn it off, we're able to get our Slack messages and leave, our analysis and have those together. We also have, from a pure legal function perspective, have built out a contract and vendor management system that we're able to build in then questions related to compliance and risk, so that you're not stalling the progress. When legal does their checks, they can see, is this company using AI? Okay, that triggers some questions that we have from a risk management perspective. Or does this company have any issues as it relates to regulatory? And so that's been super helpful. It kind of keeps things moving along. And then again, we use we're a Google company, so a lot of Google Docs with a lot of comments, tracking those, and a lot of our ticketing systems allow for us to tag each other in and out as well. So.
And of course, with the use of technology and potentially AI and all of that comes emerging risks, right? And risks that maybe none of us have been used to having to think about in the past. So, Kate, how do you think about that? What are the key emerging risks pertinent for you? And Michelle, I'd be curious to your perspective on that too.
I think top of mind for me are there two particular ones that, sort of in the near term and then longer term. The first one is because I'm sort of living it every day, is sort of this AI and use of AI. I think for a while there, at least from a compliance officer perspective, I had the view of AI as sort of this third rail that we couldn't touch and we couldn't do anything with. And it's not practical as it relates to how the world is evolving. And also the power of it we've been able to harness. We're doing some really interesting and cool work as it relates to how we can use AI to help more clients. We don't have advisors. And so, this helps us to be able to do that. Obviously, there's risk out there, both from a regulatory perspective and just the unknown. And so we've established our programs so that they're in line with existing regulatory requirements. We don't do anything that's not in line with our fiduciary duty. So that kind of helps me through the process as well. And then I think that they're also the second risk that I think about is sort of this regulatory uncertainty. I think for a number of years, there was so much velocity of the change. And now it's just understanding as a new administration comes in, what will the focus be? How will that impact the business? So those are the two things that I'm thinking about a lot and working with industry groups to think through, trying to see how it will impact us as an industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Kate said. One of the things, I was reading an article today about another firm that has had a major AML issue, and they said that they were devoting AI resources to the compliance department to help to overcome some of the, because you can always enhance the amount of staffing that you have if you've got well-designed AI to help that staff. So, and I think when you think about how do you keep on top of emerging risks, so some risks they're evergreen, but the way they materialize is what it changes. So cyber risk has been a problem for 20 or 30 years. The way that it manifests is different. So you've got to be able to keep on top of not just brand new risks, but old risks that are showing up in different ways. And the way I think about doing that, making sure that you've got as the leader, a curated set of resources, right? You cannot read everything. There's just endless amounts of publication. You need to have a curated set of resources that you personally look at on a regular, whether it's the Wall Street Journal and the SIPMA Smart Brief, and, one law firm that does a great job. And so you read their client briefs and the SEC risk alerts, whatever it is, you as the leader have to have sort of a curated set of materials that you're looking at. And then you have to have a regulatory team with the right amount of resource to stay on top of stuff. You have to go to industry events. You have to attend conferences. You have to hear speakers, and you have to stay on top of things because, what they say, you have to be right 100% of the time. The bad guys have to be right once. And there they go. So you really need to devote an adequate amount of resource to stay on top of what's happening. And then I think you also want to make sure that legal will see things emerging, maybe through litigation or regulatory action or customer complaints that the compliance department may not be aware of yet. And vice versa. Compliance may see things emerging through surveillance reports, exception reports that legal isn't aware of yet. And so being able to share things helps both of you be able to identify these risks and get in front of them. I remember years ago when sort of elder abuse started emerging as a big risk. Well, you had to sort of stay on top of that and develop systems to make sure that you are providing extra protection to the elderly. And if you're not looking at what's happening, you can get blindsided by stuff, and then you're a year behind the curve of everybody else.
Before we conclude, would love to ask both of your key takeaways. Again, thinking back at your career up to now.
Yeah, sure. And I think for anyone who's listening or thinking about, either you're a lawyer on the legal team who's thought about going to compliance, or you're in compliance and you're thinking about going to legal, I say do it. Go for it. Find yourself that opportunity. I think, as Michelle and I sort of illustrated, we've been able to do both ways and be able to get that experience and have that experience. And I think one other key takeaway is, and we talk about it sometimes in, some of these other collaborations and meetings that we have, is like, find yourself those safe spaces, those mentors and those sponsors that will help you and get you into those opportunities and give you that encouragement, or be that sort of personal board of directors to help you bounce that off of. I know I have, I've had great value in that and had great opportunities because of those people in my career. So those are my key takeaways.
Key takeaways.
Two things. There's no substitute for communication. And another way, I'm just thinking that you can identify risks and make sure that you're on top of things, is you also have to have regular communication with business partners when it's not a problem, right? Just regular, like, what are you doing? Kate said, bring me in early, bring me in often. Well, make sure that happens by having a monthly one-on-one, or attend the staff meeting of the department. But you have to be in front of the business, because they're really going to be, there's a reason they're called the first line of defense, right? They see what's coming in before anybody else does. And then it's not a competition. So it's not an internal competition for one department to be better than another department or whatever. It is a collaboration. And you use the word a lot, Vanessa, and I think it's really important. So as I said before, sharing resources, moving people back and forth, it just makes it better. It improves people's career opportunities because they have more experience, and then they're sort of attractive for a bunch of different jobs. And so, and come to events like this and network with people and say what you want in your career.
Well, that feels like a great way to end this discussion. So thank you both, Michelle and Kate, so much for joining us, and really thank you all for listening in.
Thank you for listening today. To learn more about Protiviti, visit us at protiviti.com.